You are tuned into Mostly Humans. The opinions and views shared by the hosts of this podcast are uniquely their own and do not reflect the view or opinions of the companies they work for. P.S. Don't sue or fire us. Thanks so much. Now let's get into the episode.
But now, some of the stuff that we were talking about, it's almost like OpenAI was listening to us. Maybe they listen to our podcast.
They do. They definitely
totally do. But and welcome back to Mostly Humans. I am one of your hosts, Justin Wright. I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Matt Bigelow. How are you doing this week, Matt?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing well. So Matt and I were talking. Now, we don't share a ton of ideas that aren't live because we like to just kind of let it flow. But what we did decide that we wanted to do was start to give you all as much, even more value in a smaller time window as possible. So we wanted to do some condensed episodes on some topics that people have been asking us about, things that are coming out in the space. And so today we wanted to explore, harkening back to our episode on custom GPTs, which if you haven't listened to, definitely give that a listen. But now some of the stuff that we were talking about, it's almost like OpenAI was listening to us. Maybe they listen to our podcast.
They do. They
definitely totally do. But now for those of you who have been using custom GPTs for work, there's this whole other capability now called company information, which I also think they could have come up with a better name. And if they had been listening to the podcast, your naming conventions would probably be way better here. But we want to talk a little bit about that. And then Claude's similar but different solution on the other side of the aisle. So I know, Matt, you got a chance to play around with company information a little bit. And it's basically like your work custom GPT example that you were telling people about before, like building context for work use cases and all this stuff. So how do you think this could change the way that our listeners do work?
Well, as I learned moments before the call, the easiest way to change the way you work is by clicking a button right underneath where you normally type into ChatGPT, where it says company knowledge. And from what I understand from our friend Justin here, the source of wisdom for all things generative AI, is that that button will be available to users such as us, provided we have either a .edu or a business account. So many of the people listening to this, your company has probably already invested in this. And if they haven't to date, now you have the perfect opportunity to really pitch why they should invest in all of this for you guys, because they have this company knowledge feature. But at the heart of it, it's very similar to what we've talked about before on custom GPT episodes. And I don't think this gets rid of custom GPTs. Those still have so many applications. But what this does do is it gives you the ability to feed ChatGPT all the things that you would want it to know about your business contextually. And then you can pick when you want that to be on and when you want that to be off for information. So I'll start with just one example, and then I'd love to throw one back to you. A lot of people listening to this podcast do work in sales roles. Kind of what makes the world go around. I know a lot of people don't love the sales folks out there. I've been one for many years, but we do push economies forward by just following up via email and just following up via text, always trying to get that business. But on a more serious note, when we do follow up, a lot of the times what people give back to us is an objection, a pricing objection, a timing objection, a competitive objection. I think the one that gives everyone the biggest pit in their stomach is the competitive objection. Oh, I'm talking to your competitor, they do this and this, or they do just like you and they're cheaper. Well, let's say you got that while you're working through some of your follow-up phone calls and you don't know what to say. If you had already fed in the company information about your product, even if you hadn't fed it stuff about your competition quite yet, but it did at least know like your unique value from some Google Drive things that you've added or some conversations that you've had with folks on Slack. It could reason through all of that real time. And you could type in the objection into the box and it can give you a way to handle it almost immediately based off of things that it now knows about your company that only you, your colleagues, and ChatGPT now know about your company. So that's just one small example. I think we could stop the podcast literally here. And that is massive value that every single salesperson on earth, no matter what you sell, if you use a phone or an email or a Zoom and you can pull up in ChatGPT without making it awkward, you should be using this feature.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there's a lot of really cool use cases here. On the tech side of the house, the thing that I think is really interesting about this is they wanted to make something that you could contextually share across your organization. So like this company information can be shared with different end users at your company. It actually also uses a specially tuned model of GPT-5 that is designed specifically with the context of searching for work information. So it's going to weight certain sources more when it looks for information based on questions that you ask. So if you're looking for, to Matt's point, objection handling, or if you're like, hey, scan my inbox for priority tasks, search for documentation that we have to handle objections, or what type of things should I be following up with? And it can cross-reference your Google Drive and maybe find the latest decks or case studies or those type of things. And so the model itself has been fine-tuned specifically for this business use case context. And if you're using one of these professional accounts, security becomes really important. And so OpenAI, they're not going to train their models on your business or enterprise software information. So there's a lot of guardrails in place in terms of data security. And to Matt's point, I think this is a really good thing that you can bring to your company if you've been building some custom GPTs for your coworkers or for other people in your organization. If they've been seeing traction from that, and maybe your company hasn't taken the plunge and gotten like a professional enterprise account or business account for ChatGPT. Now you can say, hey, listen, we've seen some really good traction and results from some of this custom GPT work we've been doing. We've been able to, improve the efficiency of our teams. Now we have this opportunity where we can actually leverage our company and business information in a secure way and actually share that context and share those tools across the rest of the company. And so this could be a really powerful way for you to maybe get some buy-in from your executive leadership to bring some of these enhanced tools into your organization, which gives you access to a bunch of other cool stuff that you can do on those business accounts. So I think that's, to me, one of the really exciting things about it.
Truly, we could make a podcast where we only talk about the real world applications in business of this, like where we just rattle off example after example. Here's another example. Marketers are always very keen to make sure that employees are on brand because personal brand, it's like a huge part of business now. You and I have personal brands. You and I have significant followings on social media. And smart companies know that authenticity matters. We try to be authentic, on this podcast and on social media. Authenticity matters. Companies having employees speak about products, features, sharing videos, sharing some secrets, sharing some behind the scenes, all that stuff really matters. And marketers are always kind of backed into this corner where they want the staff to do more of it because they know it performs better than any sort of paid ads that could be out there. Sometimes companies even boost their employees' social media presence because we're human at the end of the day. We buy from humans. We listen to humans. We're influenced by humans much more than we are a digital ad. That said, they just want to make sure that the employees do it the right way or use the right naming convention or don't say the release date's going to be the wrong thing. Marketers could take the time to create company knowledge that they share with all of the employees for the simple purpose of running and auditing their social posts before they post them. And this is an example of we always knew you could have made a custom GPT and maybe you could have shared that around, but it wouldn't have been easy. People probably wouldn't bring it into their workflow. Now, if marketing was simply able to put that information in about naming conventions, prices, dates, terminology, brand voice, all that kind of stuff, and tell the employees, we made it super simple. We added it to your account. It's literally right there underneath the box. Before you press post, just go ahead and run your post through this with a simple prompt that says, audit this to make sure that I'm on brand with the brand voice and tone of what marketing would want. And now all of a sudden you can get the benefits of posting, having employees and posting on social, while at the same time letting marketing control some of what that does. Because they like to relinquish the control to get the benefits, but it makes them uncomfortable if somebody says or does the wrong thing. So that's just another really cool example that I think we should start seeing immediately at businesses that are savvy.
Yeah. I think OpenAI has made a lot of really important strides into that workflow integration that you're talking about, right? Because, one of the biggest detriments to AI tools is that if they don't fit into your existing workflows really well, then the likelihood of people buying in and using them drops significantly. And I mean, this is a problem you and I solve in our professional lives every day, is how do you actually make this stuff so that it is deeply embedded in people's workflow and they'll use it. And OpenAI is seemingly releasing a lot of these features to make that process easier. And this is, I mean, they've done a lot of stuff on the business side. They have, their whole OpenAI for developers portal, which has enabled a bunch of companies to build really interesting products on top of their models. But this to me seems like one of the biggest steps in that direction of usability for a true business use case. And maybe they saw how many custom GPTs were being built for different business functions and they wanted to make that process easier. But I think, in terms of use cases, like you said, we could rattle these off all day. But I do think you bring up a really good point where I see a lot of value in this company information use case for anything that needs to be audited. So anything that you would have to run through another department for approval or whatever. I mean, large language models are pretty good at following rules if you give them the information that they need. And so this is something where you can have like your compliance department have a company information specifically for like, hey, if you're going to send external emails, please put it here first, or have us review it. And it can actually connect to your Gmail. So you can have like a drafts folder, have it review your drafts, query it against your company compliance information or whatever other documentation that you want to use for verification. And it can be like, hey, these 3 drafts look good. This one's a little funky. I don't know when you wrote this email, but please don't send it. It can go through and do those type of things, which I think is extremely beneficial also.
I love these examples. I have a really killer one I'm going to share in a second. But before I do, I think a logical question is going to creep up for listeners. And that is, what's the deal with the privacy aspect of all of this? Right?
Yeah.
So think about this for a minute. If you're going to hook up your Slack, actually, let me take one step back and just quickly let everyone know what you can and cannot add. I'm sure you all will figure it out very quickly by just clicking on that company knowledge button. But via MCP, which we've talked about before many times, you can connect Google Drive, Slack, Gmail, Google Calendar, HubSpot, SharePoint, Outlook, Teams, Outlook Calendar, Dropbox, Box, GitHub, Linear, and Google Contacts. And if you are working in the 21st century, my friends, I'm sure you're using plenty of those. Now, what's really cool is that you can hook these things up and it can search through them and reason through them and give you information. But a lot of people are probably thinking, wait. Justin said you could share company knowledge between people. So if I give it access to my Gmail, does that mean if I give company information to my colleague or my team that they can access my Gmail, or that they can access private files in my Drive, or that they can access private DMs on my Slack? And the answer to that is actually no, which is what you would want it to be.
Exactly.
The way it works is things that are designated as public can be shared as company knowledge with others, but anything that's connected uniquely to your account will only be seen by you and only be visible by you. So it does give you some of that great information that you want to be that executive assistant. And you can share that integration with other people, but for them, it only pull from the public channels. How are they doing that? I'm sure it's quite technical, and I hope there's no bugs because that could get dicey quick. But I have tested it and it does seem to work. So I think that's pretty exciting. Have you seen anything that you think the listeners need to know about before we go into other interesting examples as it relates to security in these integrations and sharing knowledge?
Yeah, no, I think I think you covered it well. It is a good point worth addressing, right? Because I also think that makes it more powerful because you can have this repository of public information that grounds the bot in the truth of your organization, being able to pull from public deal records, from Google Docs that are publicly shareable across your organization. But then it also gives you that additional layer of customization where you can actually take all of that, those company integrations and that context that have been created by the org and actually apply it specifically to your own personal workflows, emails, messages, maybe your specific deals. And so it's, in that case, I think it's doubly powerful because if you had something that was just purely general across the organization, that would be helpful, but you could probably also build a custom GPT that does that. But this gives you just that one layer deeper of customization where you can connect these systems securely, but now you can take that broad company context and apply it specifically to your own personal information. So it goes a layer deeper, I think. And versus custom GPTs, which again, to Matt's point, are still very useful, this allows you to not have to repeat a bunch of work and build these across the org for everybody, because you can have one kind of shared repository of knowledge and context that can then be customized for each individual user, which I think is really cool.
So awesome that this exists now. And then they made it easy on us. Like, think about where we've come on as a podcast when like it was a little bit trickier to stitch these things together, but we were still pushing everyone to do it. And now like it's making it so easy. And the features are coming at us so fast that it's really important that we slow down on episodes like this and talk to people about like, you must do this now. Because if you like, oh, that sounds neat, and then you just don't make it part of your workflow, you're not going to be anywhere near as efficient or as impactful and valuable as at your organization as your peers. Let me give you an example. So real time, I hooked this up as I always do on the podcast. It seemed like we have a trend here, live on the call for the very first time.
Live usage.
I just hooked the thing up. It's that easy. I think it tells us a lot. And I said to it, I'm going to have to read this slowly to make sure I don't say any confidential information. But I said, what does my CRO, he has a name, I'll leave it out of it, want from me to win him over? And if he's listening to this podcast, it was just an experiment. I'm not using AI to figure out how to win you over. But I could. Kind of could. Listen to this. This is insane. It looks like your CRO really values clarity, readiness, and speed of execution. And the Slack message below gives a good picture of what earns his confidence and trust. He recently told the team, including you and the head of product, to align on use cases for an upcoming POC to make sure you're familiar with all of them ahead of the call. He shared a Google Doc emphasizing controlling how the rollout is presented. Come to those meetings already planned. Know the client's needs and POC details that he shared inside and out. Show that you're anticipating the next step and waiting for his direction. He appreciates fast and tailored execution. This is a real thing. I'm removing the names, but this is crazy. When your company was shortlisted by blank, your CRO praised you and the head of product for how quickly and precisely you built demos based on feedback. His quote was, the client said, if you guys can do this in a week, imagine what they could do in a year. Keep that agility, fast, move, customize for each prospect, and show him you can deliver rapidly. And then it gives me 2 additional points with citing Slack conversations or comments from Google talking about what his work style is. Then I put in the next message, what should I bring up to him in our next one-on-one? And it gave me lead with results and readiness, pitch the next reusable asset that we want to have for speed, ask for direction on one deal or account. Everybody, what this has just enabled, forget about the sales example, forget about the marketing example, is you can have the most impactful conversations and one-on-ones. If you're a manager, you're running like a mile a minute. I've managed some large teams before where I was back to back all day on calls. I could now go into this. It integrates with HubSpot, right? I mean, I could literally say I have a one-on-one coming up with Susie or Joey, and I need you to look at our Slack history, deals that we're working on in Google Drive and collaborating on, pricing sheets and HubSpot. And I want to show up as a really thoughtful leader. I don't want to feel like I'm wasting their time, but I've been on back-to-back calls all day. How can I have an impactful and thoughtful conversation with them? I could say, based off of your read of what they're saying to me, do you feel like they're happy? Do you feel like they're stressed? Do you feel like I'm supporting them enough? Based on how long it took to me to respond to them, do you feel like they feel like I'm giving them enough attention? I could say, put that into a chart or a graph and show how quickly I respond to them versus someone else to make sure people think that I'm not playing favorites anyway, because that's certainly not my intention. Like the use cases for just the human to human interaction internally is insane.
Very, very cool. Honestly, mind blowing. Now, this segues well into what I also want to talk about, which is when OpenAI comes out with a cool feature, Anthropic, which is one of the other major model providers, usually comes out with a cool feature. And Anthropic pseudo recently, a little bit before company information, actually released something called Skills. And I think these are different tools for different audiences, but it's similar. And so Skills can be used in the same way that company information is being used. So all the stuff that we're talking about in terms of, leveraging shared information across your organization and giving context and all that stuff, Skills can do the same thing. They're kind of like custom GPTs plus this company information, plus a bunch of other really cool features and functionality. And I think that I'll talk a little bit about what they are and we can get into some use cases, but I think Skills are one of those things where if you have product and engineering people at your organization who want to play around with some of these AI tools, if you're, in a tech field or product field where you're interfacing with these people, this is where it starts to get really interesting. So what Skills are is basically like a folder. Think of it as a folder with a bunch of different context and abilities. So you create a folder, if we're talking about deal, customer deals, you could have like a deal analysis skill, and you can create these in Claude. And basically what you do is you give it a very high level prompt with a good description of what it does, and then kind of like a step-by-step for the model to follow. So you could be like, okay, cool. This is the deal analysis skill. Use this anytime I'm asking about the status of a deal or comparing deals or whatever. And so the description helps kind of tell Claude when to use this thing. And then you would give it a multi-step process. So it could be like, access my Google Drive and search for any documents that have this company's name. Then I want you to look into HubSpot records, look at the status of the deal, pull that information. Then I want you to run a comparison to some of our most successful deal cycles. Then I want you to let me know any other documents that I should be looking at or investigating that would help with this deal based on the stage it's at, and then give me a readout and a report. And then what you can do is you can give it a bunch of other information in another part of that folder. So it has essentially like this assets folder where you can give it a bunch of other stuff. But the cool thing about how these work is we've talked a little bit about how large language models work and how they find information on a previous episode. But the cool thing about how skills work is it uses the LLM's reasoning entirely to determine when certain skills should be used. And then it does this thing, which I think is really interesting, and it's called progressive disclosure. And so basically what happens is Claude will only use the information necessary in that skill folder to answer the question that you asked. And so you can give it a bunch of stuff that it may need for the most complex questions that you ask, but it's not going to necessarily use all of it every time. And then I think the other really cool thing about it, without going too deep down the rabbit hole, is it temporarily modifies the context of the conversation. So Matt and I have talked about this before. If you're talking to ChatGPT or Claude and you say, hey, I want you to pretend that you're a Michelin star chef and I want you to cook me a meal in my kitchen. We kind of use these examples in our MCP. You're modifying the whole context of the conversation. But what skills do is they basically turn on and turn off for a small part of the conversation as long as it takes to do the task that they're involved in. And then it just returns the conversation back to the previous context. So you can use a bunch of these skills selectively or as needed without changing the whole conversation. And so it's kind of like, pinpoint strike LLM usage on an as needed basis. And so I don't know. I think this stuff's really cool. I don't know how much you've read about or heard about these skills, but I know you can probably think of some interesting examples for how you would use this basically like folder of highly specific information that's used in specific circumstances.
Well, I just think it ties in so nicely with what we've been talking about here. One of the things that is important for people to know is there's artifacts in Claude and there's projects inside of Claude, and then there's skills. Artifacts and projects are easier to navigate to. They're in the upper left-hand corner. If you go into your Claude login and you click on your name and then you go to settings, you have to scroll down pretty far to actually find skills. And I believe it's underneath the capabilities tab. Now, what I would love to get your information on is inside of skills, you can upload a skill, but it looks like it only supports zip files and markdown files. Formatted in YAML, which is all just funny computer talk for ways that things are formatted that Justin taught me a long time ago. What differentiates these from like projects or artifacts where you're doing a lot of prompting and by writing and telling it things or uploading when would you differentiate on when to use a project versus a skill?
Yeah, great question. So if you think about projects are very much like custom GPTs where, you have the project has all of the information and the guidelines for how to do a certain thing. So maybe to go back to like the marketing example, you have like an approved social media post writer where you type in the post or the brainstorm of what you want your post to be. And then it has all these rules and prompts and guidelines from your marketing team contained within that project. So very much like a custom GPT. In that case, the entire conversation is going to be filtered through that project lens. So if you start asking about other things or you want to do something different in that same conversation, it's going to be confused because it still thinks it's this like social media approved post writer, right? So that's one case where projects are really helpful if you're doing a very specific thing and only that thing, and you want the whole conversation to be about that. Artifacts kind of add another layer where you can have multiple artifacts that are involved, and it could give access to different tools. Because Claude created MCP, I think their ability to integrate with other systems and do stuff in other systems is maybe half a step ahead at this point. And so that gives you the ability to do more of that cool stuff. With skills, you can upload them the way that you describe, but Claude has a skill writer skill, say that
It
5
does.
times fast, where you can basically have a conversation and have it create a skill for you, and it can kind of prompt you for what it needs. But the thing about skills that I think is powerful is these can be custom commands where, let's say you have some workflow that you want to do, but you don't want Claude to choose to do this thing because it's very specific, or maybe it's updating some regulated information. So you can create a skill that like you have to know the command to use, which I think is powerful. The other thing that you can do is you can actually give it basically templates for what you want the output to be like, and it will respect that template every single time. So you can have a PDF writer skill where you upload an example of what you want the final output to be like. So maybe for your company, you're creating documents with the same headings and subheadings, and there's a specific format that you want it to follow. So you can give it all of that context. And so the other thing that you can do, which this is the only tool in the large language model world that I know that can do this current state, other than like enterprise companies building their own products, you can actually have it run code. So your engineering team could create a script for something to query your system or to update a system somewhere. So like if we're talking about this deal cycle stuff, you could have a script that's updating HubSpot records with a very specific format that has been provided. And because it's executing code, it's completely deterministic, meaning you're not relying on that probability that the large language model is deciding what to do that we talked about in terms of how they generate responses, because it's going to execute this code every time, then it's going to go to the next step, then it's going to use this template. So skills are one of those things that are definitely a little more complicated. But if you have engineers at your company who are playing around with AI tools or even trying to build their own stuff internally, I think this is a product where instead of building your own tool or AI solution from the ground up for companies that have smaller teams that maybe aren't going to go out and buy an enterprise product, these give you the ability to make much more predictable and rigorous products that you can use as part of your AI workflows. So that's where I think skills come into place. They're a little more complicated, but they're way more predictable, and you can actually have them do very rigid, very deterministic things, which is almost impossible to do with just company information in ChatGPT or projects or artifacts in Claude.
Got it. Projects, let's go with like analogies. Like projects would be like a WhatsApp group chat. It's, very specific. So there's like the context of what's going on in that chat. Like if you open up a chat with your friends for a project, the context of that chat. So if you said like, hey, so what time are we going? If you just said that in a random thread to people you've never been in a group chat before, they'd be like, oh, what time are we going to where and what? But if you put it in the group chat with your buddies where you know that you guys are going to see some concert, right? The context is already there. And as humans, we look at the group chat and we say, our brain, without even really thinking about it, is like, oh, this is Justin and these are the buddies and the buddies are all going to the concert. And so when he says that, like that, you have the neural pathways to know when he's talking about the concert, we're going to the concert at 6 is going to be the response, right? Projects in Claude is like a group chat thread. You give it sustained information about the group chat, about this is a blog post project about our company, or this is a marketing deck project. And it always is using that context. I think skills these aren't the perfect analogies, but it's more like an app on your phone. Just like an app gives your phone new powers, right? Instagram gives you the ability to share photos, and Spotify gives you the ability to have music on your phone. Skills give new powers, and some are pre-installed, some you can add on your own, but it's skills for the chat specifically. So we all know our smartphones can do a lot of things, but they're a vessel to get skills called apps. And you can now bring skills in the generative word into your chat and have it do stuff for you. Is that like a fair analogy?
Yeah. And the cool thing is it's like no shade on Apple, but it's like Siri that actually works. So if you're just talking to Claude and you say, I kind of want to listen to some music, skills are the thing where it says, oh, Justin said he wants to listen to music. I actually have this skill that allows him to do that. And it basically like loads apps selectively based on what you're asking to do. So it allows you to have a conversation in Claude, and it will determine based on these skills that you've created or that your company's created, it'll actually determine when it should do those things. Like if we go to that PDF creator example, if I upload a few documents from something that I'm working on at the company and I'm like, I need to, put this in the deliverable format for whatever, it'll be like, oh, I have this thing over here where it tells me how to actually take this and convert it to PDF. And here's the structure that it has to be in. And it's going to selectively use that skill when it needs to. And then it'll dump you back into a regular conversation. So it's exactly like that app example on your phone, but it's also smart enough to know which app to use at the right time without you having to actually go through your phone and click on the app that you want.
God, that's cool. So it's like, yeah, we all know that like, hey, I can't track my food on my iPhone unless I download the app, and your brain uses the right tools to go get the food tracking app and then do the thing. You're telling us that in Claude, if you have the right skills turned on, it can determine when to itself go grab the tool and think for you, which is so cool. What are some like interesting examples, going back to company knowledge, that you think people might not be thinking about off the top of their head that they should go use this for, like starting tomorrow? Because I think they get it. Well, yeah, it sees my stuff now. But when can they use it? I gave the one-on-one example, right? Yeah. If I'm talking to my superior or I'm talking to members of my team. Anything else jump out at you that you think is like common for knowledge workers?
I think enablement or onboarding or training is another huge place where this is beneficial, because you can have all of the information about your company, the latest, training materials or documents. And a lot of times at companies, especially fast moving companies or bigger companies, there may be a lot of these trainings that are happening. Maybe you don't remember exactly what you covered in the last one. But if you're a new employee or you're on a new team or you're changing roles or you're just trying to get up to speed on a new product release, I think that use case is really interesting, because this information, a lot of companies have enablement people anyways who are creating these documents and putting them somewhere. But if you are now uploading them to this company knowledge that's shared across the team, it now lives in this one place. And I can ask questions the same way I would to like an enablement manager or a regular manager, whoever's in charge of training. And it can actually use that to give me now personally contextual information, because it can read my emails or my Slacks. Maybe it knows the stuff I've been confused about in the past, and it's going to take the most recent training materials and it can give me a more streamlined response. Or based on my email history, it knows that these are the types of questions I ask. These are the things that are usually confusing for me. And so it can kind of speak to me in a way that I would better understand. So I think, enablement, onboarding, training is another really interesting use case for this.
Gosh, it's so crazy how many episodes we could do coming out of one topic. Like, that puts the enablement and training and onboarding world, I'm not going to say on notice, but it challenges them to bring enhanced value. One of the really cool use cases that I'm thinking about is it's just cross-functional collaboration. Let's say you're getting ready for a sales kickoff. I've actually helped plan and execute on some of those, like these big ones at like a low-end enterprise company, where you probably have 3 days of content. You have customers that you need to get there. They have to put together presentations. You got to run them through, make sure they all have the branding. You're dealing with a video production company. You're dealing with probably like 10, 12 different department heads who are going to go up there. Some are doing fireside chats. I don't know why we're still saying that. We're just on stage. There's no fire. Some are up there just doing presentations on the new pricing or the new features, this, that, and the other thing. There's so much that goes into these big events where you're flying everyone in. Doesn't have to be a sales kickoff. It could be anything that is big and cross-functional like this. There's a lot of money involved. You could just talk to it about, did we get alignment? I thought we did, but did we definitely get alignment on what font we're using? Did we definitely get alignment between John in marketing and Sarah on product about how they want to position the differentiation session? And instead of like going through and command Fing, and you know how like frustrating command F can be in Slack, it's like, no, I don't want you to look for a channel name, but no, I want you to look for it inside the thread with Sarah. Was it with Sarah or was John on that too? Is it the John and Sarah and Susie one? It's a nightmare. You could just talk to ChatGPT and say, look at all of my chats, public and DMs. I'm trying to answer this question. did we agree on this font and this format for the differentiation session? Because I want to make sure we at least get one task knocked down today, and he can just do it.
Yeah. Or even just, I can never find anything in Slack. So you've inspired me to use this stuff personally just so that I can find what I'm looking for in Slack, because otherwise it's impossible. And I think that's the one thing I'm taking away from this episode is I'm just going to use this to find what I'm actually looking for in Slack, which is otherwise impossible.
I'll give one more real life example. A lot of us interface with people in other businesses in business to business world, right? And you just want to show up and be prepared for that meeting. You also want to make sure that your colleagues are prepared for that meeting. I can't give you the exact example because the possibilities are limitless, but with access to your calendar, your company's knowledge base, your Gmail, Slack history, the public channels in Slack, I'm sure you could prompt it and say, hey, listen, I'm inviting an important executive to join me on this call. Really want to make good sense of their time. Look at their calendar. If you think they're going to be pressed for time, give me the shortest TLDR of what I could use for them. This executive is busy. They might not even know about this feature that we have because they're doing high level stuff. We're talking to our customer who really cares about it. Give them the lowdown on that. Pull that from the company documentation. And my gosh, are you going to look good internally? Like, you now have the ability to have AI assess how you could better relate to somebody at work and impress them more. You then have the ability to help them actually execute on those deliverables to impress them more and show up correctly. And frankly, we're all human. You get a little bit insecure. You don't know, where do I stand with this person? You can ask the AI based off of our interactions. You think I'm doing okay at work? I mean, reading into this, do you think that they like me? Do they not like me? Like, there's so much that you could use with these tools to stand out. And if you don't, at your own peril, you won't stand out. And if you do, when you're adopting this way before everybody else, you are just going to crush it.
Yeah. So moral of the story is, if you don't have a business ChatGPT account, use this as ammunition to get that business account, because it unlocks so much more stuff that you can do. And then if you want to become friends with some engineers or some product people on your team, tell them that you know about Claude Skills, quote this episode, get them excited about it, and let them know they can build all kinds of crazy apps that just know when to turn on and turn off, which by itself is mind-blowing. But I think that's a good place to stop for this week. Hopefully this episode was helpful to give you a little bit of a deeper dive into how you can use these tools to benefit yourself professionally, to benefit other people on your team, to make you look good at work, which at the end of the day is a win in of itself. But until next time, thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Like and subscribe.